What's up, squad? This is Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. So, I was reading a recent article, and a lot of the times when I read these articles around geopolitics, looking for material, uh, deep diving into some interesting topics, I say, oh, okay, this makes sense. I can kind of follow the trail. And there's some things, of course, that catch me off guard. I'm like, oh, that's brilliant. Like, I never thought about that or saw things that way, and it really brought things together. And then on the other end is some things that I say, "Wow, that's ludicrous. That's absurd. How is this happening? Why does this relationship exist?" Right? And like I said, most of the time I see a relationship normal. So, sometimes I see a relationship, I'm like, "Wow, that's brilliant." I really like how those two countries complement each other and building that relationship, or that group of countries complement each other. And then, like I said, is some things on the awkward end. I'm like, why is that? This is a waste of taxpayer money right here. Why are these two countries talking? And I just saw an article around Egypt and Kenya signing a series of agreement between President Sisi of Egypt and President Ruto of Kenya. Signed a series of agreements escalating their partnership to um, a comprehensive and strategic partnership, more or less. It's a series of agreements around um, investment, trade, education, etc., mining, economics. A lot of it. I didn't see the key word security. I didn't see that word, but who knows what's to come on the back end. But just at this time, let's just call it strategic, a strategic relationship, mostly around um, economic benefit. And I thought that was odd, right? Now, Egypt, I understand why Egypt wants to be friends with Kenya, right? Because Egypt has over 100 million people. And unlike its other Arab neighbors, it is not drowning in resources to the same degree. Uh, it's not as rich as a resource rich as Libya next door, or Saudi Arabia, or some of the Gulf states. So Egypt really has to provide, and this is shows. This is why Egypt is almost, you can almost say it's subsidized by America, right? Like, Egypt is a military state that's subsidized by America, despite all pretenses. You can tell this by the tight control they keep on their politics. Egypt does not mess around politically, and the army's in charge in that place. Now, and America cut foreign aid, and remember, it was two countries they refused to cut foreign aid to, right? Israel, Egypt. And that makes sense. Egypt is the demographic heartland of the Arab people. And the Arab people occupy the Middle East. And if you're worried about Middle East security, the first question you need to ask yourself is, where is Egypt? What is Egypt doing? Now, one of the great keys that Egypt has is the Suez Canal, which is once again guaranteed through them by America. Remember, Britain, France, and Israel tried to team up on Egypt and take the Suez Canal. And America was like, hey guys, get the hell out. And America actually came down on the side of Egypt. So Egypt and America have been quite cozy in that relationship. America gets great stability within the Middle East, and Egypt's oligarchy gets to be subsidized. Its military and oligarchy get to be subsidized by America. Now, on top of this, we know that Egypt is barren, right? It's if you look at Egypt, it's kind of like a rectangle or a square shape, and you just got a slit down the middle, and that slit down the middle is the Nile. And the vast majority of its people, 95, 99% of its people, live along the banks of the Nile River, right? So water is extremely vital, extremely vital. Water management is extremely vital towards Egypt. And let's just be honest here. No one in the world, it seems, based on observation, care to have their livelihood controlled by sub-Saharan Africa. No one. And it made Egypt crap the bed when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed finally got his Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, his GERD Dam, built on the Nile. Now, we must remember, the Nile runs through Egypt. It will run south to north. The Nile merges, and this is why geopolitics is so important in geography and understanding this. So the Nile is actually two rivers that merge in Khartoum, and then it empties out into the Nile, out to the Mediterranean, through Egypt, going north. And so those two rivers that flow into the Nile, you have one part that's the eastern part will hook up and go into Ethiopia, and then that'll be called the Blue Nile. And then you have the Nile that continues south down to Lake Victoria in Uganda, through Uganda, as well as through South Sudan, through Uganda, Lake Victoria. This is the White Nile. Now, 4/5 of the Nile flow comes from the Blue Nile. So Ethiopia more or less controls the flow of the Nile. So Egypt unable to put real pressure. I think they're unable to put real pressure on Ethiopia. They have been very, very upset about the GERD being placed. Because now Ethiopia controls Egypt's water supply. It is out their hands, and to them, it's unacceptable. For some reason, it's unacceptable. You can have France with nuclear weapons, America with nuclear weapons, Soviet Union with nuclear weapons, right? But it's unacceptable for another African country to want to officially manage its resources. That's the one that pisses you off. That's the part where you just cannot sit with yourself. So Egypt has been trying its darndest to try to correct this in their mind. So what really gets me about this relationship is the Kenya point. What the hell is Kenya doing? And I'm a fan of Kenya. Kenya has been a relatively great African success story. East Africa in general, Kenya especially, a great East African success story. Some premier cities in Africa are in Kenya. Kenya has done relatively well for itself. Of course, it's had some growing pains, but what country doesn't? And I'm trying to figure out what the flip does Kenya get from a relationship with Egypt? What can Egypt provide them that they can't get somewhere else at a better discount? Egypt is not that spectacular. It'd be different. You could say, oh, with Turkey, you might get some drones. With, I don't know, UAE or Qatar, you can get some oil, natural gas. I'm trying to figure out what Egypt can offer Kenya. And I can't think of a darn thing. So I'm reading, trying to get backstory, because these countries also don't have a history with each other. Now, Egypt sees Kenya on Ethiopia border. This is obvious. But this is why it so frustrated me. Because one of the articles I read, true or not, it suggested that President Ruto was pushing for Egypt to support the appointment of Raila Odinga to the chairperson of the African Union Commission. And I hope this isn't a cheesy political move. For those that don't know, Raila Odinga is actually President Ruto's biggest competition within Kenya for his job. And I'm hoping he did not just sign a strategic partnership with Egypt, for he can basically get Raila Odinga out of his face and put him in the African Union Commission while he's able to run the country in peace, because he doesn't want any more mischief. Remember, it's been a couple riots now, a couple mishaps in Kenya, and some of the people blame Raila Odinga behind the uprising. So I just hope the President Ruto didn't do this grant, because this is significant to me. This is very significant because Egypt sees that Kenya is next to Ethiopia. Egypt is insecure about water. It's trying to check, bully, intimidate Ethiopia some way, somehow, right? They can't do it directly, so they got to do it indirectly, right? And the way you do it indirectly is trying to surround Ethiopia, build influence around Ethiopia. And To me, this would be a betrayal by Kenya if they was to do so, because nobody gives Africa, regardless of all the Western hate that Africa has, nobody gives Africa headaches like the MENA countries. Nobody. It's African servants yeah, African servants that are abused in these countries. It is Africans that are slave traded in these countries. Do you see what the MENA countries are doing to Sudan? You saw what it did with South Sudan and Sudan. Now you see what they're doing with the RSF in the capital Khartoum. They're destroying the country, right? Where do you think that funding is coming from? The funding is obviously, and the support is coming from MENA countries. So for Kenya to ally with a MENA country, knowing that it's being used against its neighboring African country, is like, is that not despicable? I think that it's really unfortunate, especially when you see what Prime Minister, if you can understand the vision, see the vision that Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is really trying to implement in Ethiopia and building a strong African power. And for Kenya to do this agreement, I just find to be unfortunate. And it's in the worst way, because a lot of people, a lot of nations don't really deal with Africans in that way. And what I mean by that, and I mean this African worldwide, because the Chinese come deal with African countries because they need space. They want to operate in their own situation. They know the West is going to be too difficult. So then Africa is kind of like the last frontier. They go into Africa and they'll get the resources and they'll do the work. And it's for them relatively easy to do. But more or less, when you see a relationship, especially when it comes to the West or Middle Eastern countries, the only time they deal with an African, right, is to placate, fool another African. And what do I mean by that? When the Belgians were pumping out rubber from the Congo, it wasn't Belgian. They had some Belgian officers there, but those was African forcing African laborers onto those fields. It was Africans chopping off limbs. It was Africans selling Africans into slave trade. You know, as Malcolm X would say, you know, they would get one of us to kill one of us just so they can say it was one of us. And this is a situation, and for Kenya to be the sophisticated superstar, economically and from a development point of view that it has been, I just found this move to be out of whack. But of course, geopolitics on the continent have left a lot to be desired, more or less. And there's very few great actors. But I just, hopefully it's some benefit that I'm not seeing right now. But it's just unfortunate because I think this is Egypt's way of trying to use Ethiopia's neighbor against Ethiopia. And basically Kenya plays the role of a pawn. That's the value that I see Kenya has for Egypt. And the value Egypt has for Kenya, I'm still waiting to see. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below. You think I'm dead on? You think I'm way off? I'm really interested in your point of view. If you have any topics, hit me up. Let me know. Like, share, subscribe if you enjoyed the content. Until next time, take care. Bantu up.